So, welcome to a new thing I'm wanting to do on my channel. I don't know what I'm going to call these. I'm leaning towards calling them Mediasides or Media Rants, something along those lines. Might even put a poll on Twitter for, finalize the name when I'm editing this. Basically, these are going to be the same as my solo discussion videos. They'll even go in the same playlist on my channel. But they're going to be a lot shorter, hopefully. It's not going to be like 30 minutes like my other solo discussions are. And today's topic I wanted to talk about is Injustice. So, Injustice is a multimedia DC property that I just don't get. I don't like it. And for 8 years now, it's been about 8 years since the first game came out and the first line of comics came out, and they just had a movie, which is why it's on my mind. And I had been kind of racking my brain around this, and for a long time I thought it was just the lack of creativity, because DC is no stranger to these otherworld plots. All the way back in the 60s, we had I'll put some text here on the screen. I can't remember the exact issue of Justice League it was and what it was called. But basically it led to like the Crisis on Two Earths and what would eventually become the line of crises that DC would use to keep rebooting their universe. And so it was pretty novel in the 60s to have a multiverse where you had the characters you cared about and then you had like evil versions of those characters. And that's really all the creativity that has ever gone into this. Various interpretations of this basic story have only tried to add a little more nuance by adding in different reasons for the Justice League to go rogue like this. The big one in Justice League, the animated series, was the death of the Flash. In this other universe, Earth 3 or whatever it was, the Flash dies, Superman kills Lex Luthor or arrests Lex Luthor. I can't remember exactly how it went down. But basically, he slowly became a dictator of Earth in order to keep something like the Flash's death from happening again. And I totally get the novelty of this type of story, and I get the escalation of the trope, we're not so different, you and I. That's a very popular trope in literature. For a great example, Naruto is kind of a master class at this. Damn near every single antagonist in the series is in some way a dark reflection of where Naruto is at that time. And how similar they are to Naruto is what makes them good foils, even if there are a lot of differences as well, and those differences are what makes those characters interesting in their own right. Gaara is a very different character than Naruto. They do have their similarities. They are both Jinchuriki. They're both son of a fourth Kage. They both had demons sealed inside of them at very early ages. They both dealt with a lot of loneliness, but unlike Naruto, Gaara isn't an idiot. he's one of the smarter characters in the series. I think it's the Ino Tensei version of the second Mizukage calls him the golden child of the five Kage, because he's just so intelligent and such a prodigy at fighting, whereas Naruto had to work a lot harder to get where he ends up at that, by the end of that series. And I could probably go on and on just about Naruto villains, but I'm gonna cut it off there with Gaara. There's a lot of differences, there's a lot of similarities. That's what makes the dynamic interesting. When it's literally the dark version of your characters, that's where it stops being as interesting. Evil Superman isn't interesting, he's just evil Superman. And this is my problem with the logic, the new wave edgy hero properties. Homelander isn't a character. He is just edgy, evil, corporate Superman. There is nothing interesting about him outside of how evil of a Superman he is. Same thing with Omni-Man and Invincible, who I think might even be a worse offender than Homelander. Because, spoilers for the Injustice comics. I don't know if the animated series got this far, but there does come a point where, you kind of wonder, like, ooh, does he really care about his son? Like, yeah, even if that is the case, that would humanize him a little bit. It wouldn't make him an interesting character. It would just make him selfish, but in a different way. Like, there's nothing selfless about how he treats his son. It is completely selfish. I want you to do exactly what I do, but the exact same. No difference, no back-talking. Or I will... And he makes this vague threat like, I could live a long time. I could create a whole new Mark. I can make a whole new sun on a whole different planet and just, I don't even really need you, but I want you. And it is originally portrayed as, like, being him trying to goad Mark into helping him by making him feel more wanted than needed. But at the end of the day, Omni-Man does exactly that. Like, I know the initial part where he's pleading with Mark happens in the animated series. I've seen the memes. I've seen clips. The comics, I've read a little further in the comics than that. He does exactly that. Like, he does not give a flying fuck about Mark. He is just evil. There's nothing interesting about him. He just wants world domination. He is the bare minimum what a villain needs to be. So, going to actual evil Superman, they try to do this thing in Injustice where it's justified, and yes, it is very tragic what happens in the Injustice timeline. Would that break Superman? I don't know. That is an interesting ground to till. What is not interesting is how it never actually... Injustice 2 is a better story because it does delve into a little more of, like, the implications of this and what would actually happen if this were to go down, and it makes Superman a more interesting character in that story than he was before. But it's not enough for me to get over the fact that he's just evil Superman and that he just goes so far in that direction over that one tragedy. Like, think about in DC continuity, in the mainline continuity, whatever accounts for that nowadays, who knows? How many heroes have died? How many civilians have died? How many people close to the heroes have died? And they've never broken because the story has never called for them to be broken? And this is really what gets my goat about Injustice, is that it has these more canonical equivalent versions of the Justice League come in and clean up the mess of the Injustice world. Like, Superman beats his evil self up relatively easy. Like, it just makes it like they want to ask these questions, they want to tell these dramatic stories, but they don't want any of it to stick. They don't want to actually do anything with it besides the novelty of evil Superman. And Superman going so far in one direction, that's one thing, especially when it was he who went through that personal trauma. The other heroes going along with it makes it so much worse. I had the same complaint initially with the Green Lantern comics, because in the mainline Green Lantern comics, they did the same thing with Hal Jordan, and they ended up retconning it to where he was possessed by Parallax. They had Hal Jordan go through this great tragedy during the Doomsday story. He never really gets to cope and go to therapy over it, and he ends up going crazy and killing all the other Lanterns. And it's punishment for that he actually becomes the Spectre, which was, that was going on around the time that I was actually getting into DC Comics, so that stuff I'm pretty familiar with. Didn't really work there either, because it always comes off as edgy for edgy's sake. Same with my complaints with Homelander and Omniman. They are just edgy Superman for the sake of having an edgy Superman. If they wanted a dark hero who was a fake hero, but actually secretly a villain, they could do that. There have been stories like that. There have been stories that have done that. There have been stories where that is the villain's plan. Incredibles comes into mind, where Syndrome, he was a villain, but he wanted to parade himself as a hero. He wanted to create these Omni droids, wipe out all the other heroes, and then be the last hero remaining that wipes out the Omni droids, and then he wanted to sell his stuff to everyone, because when everyone is super, no one is. That was his main goal. Ranger Reject is a really great example of the other possibility I said, where the Dragon Keepers in Ranger Reject are very cruel. I wouldn't say evil. They are corrupt for sure, fascistic almost certainly, but they are perpetuating that phony war in that manga in order to keep the power that they have, because they actually do care about protecting the people, and they want to, it's all for the sake of peace. It's actually much more like the ending of The Dark Knight, where peace was built on a lie. Harvey Dent, he went bad, he became Two-Face, but no one knew that because they needed Harvey Dent as this white knight who was a martyr. And Batman took the fall for all the people he killed, which is a little weird. Just say Joker killed them, but whatever. That minor plot hole in The Dark Knight. Thematically, it's sound, though. It is thematically 100% airtight. Plot-wise, it just has a couple loose ends that do some of which do come into play in Dark Knight Rises, thankfully. To that movie's credit. But in the most recent chapter of Ranger Reject, we find out that there are actually a couple executives alive, and that if the public knew about this, they would get scared. And so that is one of the reasons why the Rangers are, they take their job very seriously. Red Keeper especially does not ever actually underestimate D and the other Dusters. When they step out of line, he does not hold back. He whips out his divine tool and he annihilates them. Or at least he did in F's case. And D, he did try that, but D is a slippery bastard if nothing else, which is why he's the main character. But that's more just, talk about edgy superheroes and kind of how sick of them I am. I like my heroes to be virtuous, even if they have flaws, and I do think that they should have flaws. They should be knights in bloodstained armor. I like that. I can't remember who's. I think it was either Frank Miller or maybe it was a pulp noir writer before Frank Miller. Frank Miller was just paraphrasing him. But basically, this was the modus operandi that Frank Miller used when writing Daredevil. Daredevil is a very virtuous human being who has flaws that get him in a lot of trouble. That makes him an interesting character. You can have both when it comes to heroes. You can have both when it comes to villains as well. You get villains who are very sympathetic, like the movie version of Doc Ock, or Loki in the later MCU movies, or the Nagato slash Pain in Naruto. I could go on and on listing examples of sympathetic villains that tread that line between having virtuous things about them while also being corrupt and evil in a way. Whereas people like Homelander and Omni-Man and the Injustice version of Superman, they take it so far that they just become uninteresting. And that's gonna wrap it up here today. I don't have a script, so I don't have an airtight conclusion. But that is the main problem I have with the Injustice storylines. They are cowardly with how they handle stakes. They are inept in how they portray the corruption of a hero, and they are half-assed in the gameplay department as well. The games just aren't good fighting games. Which is why I'm not going out and defending Injustice 2, even though, again, Injustice 2 is a much better story. And all that stuff is coming to light more and more as we see more and more versions that have the ruby tinted glasses pulled off. I'm seeing a lot of people actually hate the Injustice movie for a lot of the reasons that I, hinted at here. So if you like this video and you want to see more, tell me what subjects you would like to see videos like this on. This is going to be a series that I kind of do spur of the moment and kind of just as I see fit. But I'm always looking for suggestions. I'm always looking for new things to distract me from my more pressing videos that I am currently neglecting. I'm gonna be editing this instead of editing Quint Part 7. Because, it's how it be sometimes. Thanks for watching.